right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our workshop today, specifically for AGNR students talking about graduate school. So you're thinking about graduate school. My name is Christina Farmer, and I serve as the Program Director for Career Services, specifically for the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping for us to consider. So first and foremost, this event is being recorded, and we ask that you all mute your microphones during the presentation. You can submit questions in the chat, and we hope that you have come prepared with questions for our two faculty members and grad student panel. I also would love it if you can sign in so we can keep track of the students that are in attendance for this event. So you can find the URL for you to sign in. It's written in the PowerPoint slide. Once you go to this URL, you'll type 1234, press enter, and then enter your UID. So once again, if you can copy the URL, I'll also put it in the chat as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping as a reminder again, this event is being recorded. We're asking that you mute your phone, your microphones, and that you submit questions in the chat. You can sign in using this URL, type 1234 and press enter, and then type in your UID. I'll also put the link in the chat. So I want us to go ahead and get started, and I'll introduce our two faculty presenters. They're Dr. Carol Kiefer and Dr. Josh Lynn. Dr. Kiefer is with the Department of Animal and Avian Sciences, and Dr. Lynn is with AREC, Agricultural Resource Economics. I'm going to go ahead and share their PowerPoint, and they will be talking a little bit about the graduate school process. So as soon as I have it up, Dr. Kiefer and Dr. Lynn, you can take it over. All right.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. You should go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to have 5 topics today, and I'm going to cover the first one, why pursue graduate school. So if we could have the next slide. So there are several reasons to consider why to go to graduate school. One would be, what is your career goals? What are your interests? I always recommend to students, undergraduate students, that they start looking at different job boards and job advertisements early on while they're undergraduates, so they can see what type of qualifications they would need for the jobs they're interested in. So if all the jobs you're really interested in and love, say, master's or a PhD, that means you probably need to go to graduate school. And also it would indicate what type of graduate program or degree you would need to have, whether it's more research-based or not. So today I'm talking from the Animal Science Department. We are very research-oriented graduate program. So whether you got a master's or a PhD, you would have to write a research thesis. So if you're not interested in working in the lab, then you wouldn't apply to our program. We don't offer a non-thesis program. I noticed in one of the outline, it says, avoiding a weak job market. I don't know so much about that for going to graduate school, because if you hate graduate school, then perhaps that's not the best reason to go to graduate school. Now, if you want to select master's or PhD, this depends on what type of job you're interested in. A lot of technical jobs, and Dr. Lynn will jump in about the type of AREC jobs where you don't do a research thesis, where you might just need a little extra experience and coursework to get a job, and a master's would work. Or a PhD in our more research-oriented animal science. A PhD would be if you wanted to run your own lab, either in industry or in academia. Now, when it comes to selecting schools and selecting programs, this is where you really need to think about what you're interested in. What type of program do different schools offer? Are they of interest to you? Is that the type of program you want to join? If you're joining a research-oriented program, so you have to do a research thesis, then you want to look at, who's in the department, what type of research do they do? Is it something that you're interested in? What is the reputation like? You'd want to maybe do a little homework and find out if they have a reputation for being a good mentor or not. And particularly, you would want to see what their placement rate is for different types of jobs. Do their graduate students get jobs when they're finished? Dr. Lynn, you want to add anything to that? I know I go fast.
Sure, I'll just add maybe a couple things, and then we can see if anyone has questions. Well, so first of all, actually, like Carol, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm glad we have this opportunity to just sort of share some thoughts and try to provide some advice. And a really important part of this is I think if you guys have questions, we want to make sure that we can answer them. So just a couple of things from the perspective of economics and applied economics programs like the one that I'm in. So first of all, I'm the Director of Graduate Studies in AREC, and so that means that in addition to teaching undergrads and oftentimes giving them advice about whether and how to apply to graduate school, I've also been on the admissions committee for the last few years for our PhD program. So some of my insights are coming from that that role, as well as just what I've seen from other programs in other schools. So I think one thing that's important to understand is that different disciplines have different norms and structures for their programs. So in economics and applied economics programs, usually for a master's or a PhD program, you're picking a program when you decide where to go, not an advisor. And so usually you'll end up picking an advisor in your first or second year. Many PhD students end up switching advisors in their third or even fourth year. I did that myself long ago when I was a graduate student. And so you're picking a program, not the advisor. And so that means that, like Carol said, you really should take a close look at placement outcomes. That's an important information that programs provide typically on their websites. I mean, we do that on our website. And if you are interested in a program and they don't provide that information, you can try contacting them, but that may also be kind of a bad sign if they're not willing to supply that information online. But I think that's an important thing to consider. I think another important thing when you're deciding about whether to apply is to try as much as possible to talk with current and recent students. So that's why it's really great that Christina set up a second session here after this one with some graduate students. But I would suggest, look for as many opportunities as you can to try to talk with students, because they're going to, be able to give you a perspective of what it's like to actually be in graduate school. As opposed, it's now been 15 years since I was, and so it's really important, I think, to get perspectives from people who are in the programs now.
And the other thing we probably should mention is when you talk about master's versus PhD is time commitment. And I don't know about an AREC, so you can jump in and mention that. But for the master's degree in animal science, where the students have to do a research project and write up their thesis, it's average 2.5 years. We aim for 2 years, but the average is 2.5 years. And for PhD, we aim for 4 years, and anybody in animal science that might be on here will be laughing at me because the average is actually 5.5 years, and in some labs it stretches out to 6 to 6.5 years because you're doing research with either animal or different live cell type conditions, which always creates problems and stretches out the time longer than you think. So, there's a definite long-term commitment if you're going into the PhD program in animal sciences or science-based, research-based program.
Yes, similarly for our program and economics-related programs, typically two plus years for a master's and then 5 to 6 for a PhD. And I'd say this is something I think that we'll get into a little bit more in the next few little topics. But it's pretty uncommon for people in economics to go straight from undergrad to a PhD program. Often there's some step in the middle where you're either doing research or you're getting a master's. But anyway, we'll talk about that more in a bit.
Make us work, ask us questions.
Right now, we don't have any questions in the chat, but students, the way our process is going to work, we'll talk about a topic and then have questions around this topic, then move on to the next topic and have questions. So if you have any questions about, why should someone go to grad school, a master's versus a PhD, or selecting schools and programs, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then Dr. Lynn and Dr. Kiefer will talk about them.
I actually, I have a question. I was wondering actually 2 things. First off, is there any way to bridge 2 of the agriculture programs, like say you're in horticulture and you wanted to also bridge it with animal science and do something independent?
Well, I guess that sort of depends on whether your mentor has some sort of collaboration or it's something that can bridge the 2. Because as you know, research costs money. So
Yes.
Typically students are working in projects that are within their mentor's realm. In my case, we're doing research in collaboration with engineering department, biochemical engineering. So it all depends on the project and of course the mentors.
And also, what would be the best way to try to choose a mentor if you don't know if their labs are full of research students?
Contact them. That's the best way. Contact the mentor, talk to the mentor, the potential mentor.
So there are 2 questions in the chat. The first one is a clarifying question. So if someone decides to maybe pursue the master's and then a PhD, would it be 2 to 2.5 years and then an additional 6 to 6?
Well, in my program, it would depend. If you're getting a master's in our program and then you go to another program, the PhD would be whatever the average time in that program, so it might be 4, 4.5, 5, 6, would depend on the type of research and how long it took you to do the research. If say you got a master's in one lab and then you like that lab and you like that project, that type of project so much that you stayed on to do a PhD, then it's quite possible that the PhD might take 4 years because you already put 2.5 in for the master's. So it very much depends on the labs where you get the master and the PhD. We have had someone that did their master's in I think 2.5, and then got their PhD in under 4, but they were exceptional. Other times, it's more like 4, 4.5, even 5 if they've already got their master's in the same lab, but not necessarily 6.5.
And I would think about it this way, that having a master's degree before you start a PhD program is going to put you in a better position to complete the PhD program. And so, students in our program may take 5 to 6 years. If you're coming in with a master's and are in a good position, ready to go, you may be more likely to finish in 5 rather than 6. So, it's not going to be, 2 plus 6, but you may be able to shave a year off. But typically, programs do not accept credits from other programs, from other universities. Sometimes programs will offer placement exams, so you could try to place out of say an introductory course, but it's usually pretty difficult to place out like that. And so I think that the real benefit of having the master's first is that you're going to be more efficient doing research, once you're moving on to that stage.
Yeah, and to add to that, I say we do take people straight into the PhD program. They tend to take longer to get their PhD than students that already have a master's. So it sort of all averages out in the end. One person asked, are you working this time when you're pursuing a master's or PhD? Well, that will depend on the program you're in. And in our program, we generally only accept students if we can offer them an assistantship. So that means they're working within the department while they're getting their master's or PhD, and they're usually working on their own project with the assistantship. I know in some other programs, you may be working at an external job or something. I don't know about ARAC.
It's a similar situation to yours, where all of our admitted students, at least in the past number of years, as far as I know, have come in, with funding and with RA positions, research assistantships set up for their first year. And so those positions are usually nominally 20 hours per week. And so you're doing that work for 20 hours per week, plus you're taking your classes. In our program, we usually try to take it easy on the first years because they're taking some pretty intensive courses that they've got to get through in that first year, and so we tend not to also give them extensive RA duties as well. But in general, you should expect, if you are coming in funded, it'll be for a certain number of years, and so our students almost always will admit them with 5 years of funding. And so they'll have either an RA appointment, a research assistantship, and then later on, once they're done with classes, then they may get a teaching assistantship instead. And so that will then give you some experience teaching. And so if you're looking into, looking for teaching jobs afterwards, that can be helpful. But, in general, you should expect to be working some either in a research or a teaching assistantship.
And I noticed one asked, is it possible to complete a PhD while working? If you mean working outside of the department, no, we wouldn't encourage that. You have to spend so much time working on your research that that would be truly difficult. But then, as I said, we tend to only accept students into our program if we can offer them an assistantship. How do you find out about mentors if you're brand new to the idea? Well, that's where I say, why pursue? What are your interests? What are you interested in studying, working on? Find the department that studies that type of topic, and look at the faculty in that department. They should have websites which describe their research and their research program. If you go to animal science, we have a category called research areas. If you click on research areas and continue scrolling down, you'll see different projects that faculty members are working on. Then you can go look at that faculty member's website to see more specifics on it.
Another question that was asked was about are teaching research assistantships available for both master's and PhD programs?
Yeah, whether the person comes in as a master's student or a PhD student, we generally do not bring them into our program unless we can provide them with an assistantship. So assistantships are for both master's and PhD.
And there's in applied economics and economics, I'd say there's more heterogeneity in master's programs. I mean, in some cases, you'll be admitted with funding, in which case it'll be like what we were just describing if you're a PhD student with funding. But then there may be master's programs where you actually don't have funding, in which case you need to finance the education some other way. So that's obviously an important consideration, an important differentiation across these different programs. In our particular case, we usually don't actually admit students who are just intending to end with a master's. And that's just because of the scale of our program. I think, we're not able to sort of cater to both types of master's only students and PhD students. But there are many programs that do have standalone master's programs. And so you would apply to that separately.
And some of them have standalone non-thesis master's programs.
Right.
Depending on the university and the college and the program itself, you'd have to look and see. And we don't offer those, but I would guess that many of the ones that offer non-thesis also would expect you to be self-financing in that case. But you'd have to look at the particular program.
Another question refers to kind of a master's degree versus work experience to potential employers. You talked a little bit about like their placement rate and where looking at programs placement rate. So can you talk a little bit about having a master's degree?
One of the places I quite often recommend students to look is the USA Jobs website. And of course, there are other websites, and you can look for the type of jobs you're interested in, what qualifications. And often you'll see it says 2 years of experience or a master's. And so if you have 2 years or more of really good work experience, a lot of those jobs will be just as happy as if you have a master's, because you actually have real work experience. But that would be very dependent on the individual job. And again, whether you could talk to somebody in HR or the lab that's hiring or the company that's hiring and see which they would prefer. I don't know how feasible that is, but that would be something to attempt if you already have, say, 2 years of work experience, and you say, well, I don't really want to get a master's, I want to get this job. Talk to them.
And just to add to that a bit, I think there are sort of multiple issues, right? One is which is better for getting that job in the first place. And then the other is, will not having a master's place some sort of ceiling on how far up you can advance? And so that's another consideration. And of course, there may be options later on if you take a job and then maybe you take some time off or you try to do a master's, on the side. But that is something I think, when Carol was talking about looking at, job, qualifications and requirements when you're applying, I think it's important not just to be thinking about getting the job in the first place. Obviously, that's crucially important. But I think not that much less important is the question of, will you be stuck with some sort of dead end job?
And I think a lot of that depends on your skill set, because I've known people that had experience and went into the biotech industry, never completed a master's or anything, and were able to move up the research technician line really well because they had a great skill set. But it would depend on the company you're working in, and also if you want to run a lab, then those quite often require a graduate degree.
There's one more question I want to get to, and then I want us to move to the next topic so we can have enough time, and then we'll circle back to some of those questions. What's the balance between research and coursework in a master's or PhD program? Is there a general pattern, or is it highly individual?
Well, for University in Maryland, they need a certain amount of coursework to get a master's, and that depends on the program to a certain extent. In ours, we require 24 hours of coursework. So if you're taking a 3 to 4 hour course, you can divide that and figure out how many classes you need to take. But typically, our master's students will take around 2 to 3 courses their first semester or 2, and then as they get further into their program, they take fewer and fewer coursework classes and focus more on their research.
And in our program, it's perhaps more abrupt than that. And similarly in other economics programs where our students are taking courses, usually 3 per semester, each semester for the first 2 years. And then maybe just a teeny bit after that. So maybe one more course after that. But it's really all concentrated in the first 2 years. And so you have that coursework, plus you have your research or teaching assistantship that I mentioned. That's, think of it as roughly half-time work, maybe a little bit less. And then after your second year, then if you're in a PhD program, you're moving on to your dissertation, and you're starting to write your dissertation. So in economics, I think for better or for worse, it is really a big jump. That third year is really difficult for a lot of students. And I think one important consideration when you're looking at programs is, how much do programs really support that transition? It's certainly a transition that's like less abrupt in other fields perhaps, but it's always a transition you have to make, right? I mean, where you're going from, taking classes, maybe doing a bit of research as an undergrad, to now being responsible for, doing research and being more of an independent researcher. And that's an important transition to make. And I think some programs are more effective than others at supporting their students and helping them make that transition. And that shows up in completion time, and then that shows up in placement.
All right, let's move on to the next topic.
Okay, so we've already touched on some of these topics a little bit, and I think some of the questions that came up in that first session are actually going to be addressed here. So, I think this is this was a good time to move on to this topic. So this topic is about preparation, how to get ready, how to prepare yourself and your application for graduate school. So we've already talked a little bit about research opportunities, and I think, it's important for a few reasons to pursue undergraduate research opportunities, at least to the extent you can. One is that it will start to give you some sense of like what it's actually like to do research, and what it's like to be the one responsible for generating the new question and figuring out how to answer that question. You won't be doing it yourself as an undergraduate, but if you're in a good project, you'll see a little bit of how it's done, and I think that'll give you some sense of what you're in for. Also, having some experience as an undergrad is going to be useful, helpful to show on your application that people, when committees are reviewing your application, they'll see, oh, this person has already done some research and still wants to apply, and that research didn't scare that person off. So that's a good sign, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned that we often hesitate to admit students straight from undergrad. Now we do sometimes. So just to be clear, it's not like we never do, but we do treat those applications sort of more carefully, I'd say. Is that those students often have less research experience, and so students may come straight from undergrad to a PhD program and then realize, oh wait, this actually is not for me. And so the undergraduate research opportunity can help you with that. I think another experience that can be very useful is, taking a job at a lab, taking a job at a think tank, or, depending on what discipline we're talking about, finding some job in between undergrad and graduate school that will, number one, again, give you some sense of what research is like, and then number two, give you somebody, maybe more than one person, who you can develop a close relationship with, and then can write a recommendation letter for you. So we'll be talking about recommendation letters next, but I just mentioned that now as one of the reasons for getting some additional experience in between undergrad and graduate school. The other thing that for preparation that I already mentioned is talk with other students. There are some, at least in economics, there are some online chat groups. One needs to, of course, be wary about what you can encounter in those sorts of environments, but sometimes they can be helpful, and I've heard from students that there is some useful information, especially if you're getting honest information coming from current students. That can be very helpful. Once in our program, once we've admitted students, we then try to connect them with current graduate students, and so they can then talk with one another, and the applicants can then learn more about the program. And I think that that's pretty much universal and in economics and applied economics, that once you're admitted, then there's some sort of like prospective students day or something like that, where you'll have a chance to get to know students in the program and hear from them. We intentionally have a few sessions where the faculty are just nowhere in sight, and it's just the current students and prospective students, so that they can talk freely with each other. And I think that that's also an important part. You want to get an honest assessment of what the program is like. And I think that this all works well. That again, like I said before, you're in economics, you're choosing the program, you're not choosing the advisor, and so talking with the students can be helpful in choosing the program. And usually you'll have time to choose the program after, if you're fortunate enough to have gotten into multiple programs, then you'll have time to decide among them. That the way that it generally works is that universities can admit you, and then you have until usually it's April 15th to make your decision, and everybody has the same deadline. So you'll know which schools you've gotten into, and then you can compare them all against one another when you're deciding. So then I think maybe just a couple of things just to mention on the last bullet point about how best to articulate your experiences. As I've sort of been getting at all along, I think you want to articulate just kind of that what you're getting into, and that you're mature, and you're not just like applying to graduate school just sort of on a whim, or because whatever your parents want you to, or something like that. That you really know you're going in with your eyes open, and you know what you're getting into. And you want to be able to explain how going to graduate school is going to help you meet your longer term objectives, right? That and it's I'm you don't want to write this write on a personal statement like here's what I want to be in 10 years. I mean, you kind of want to avoid sort of too many cliches, but that's sort of the mindset I think that you want to be in when you're writing a personal statement, and which again we'll be getting to more in depth on personal statements in a little while, but I think you want to show that you're ready to do this. So I think that's about it. Carol, is there anything you want to add before we turn to questions?
The research opportunities as an undergraduate and a competitive one is like you say, you want to, I mean, if you didn't have the opportunity to do any research as an undergraduate, don't just give up. I mean, you admit it that, because I was really busy doing other stuff or whatever, unfortunately I didn't have the opportunity to have a research experience, but I have talked to people and I understand it'll be quite a change, but I really want to do this. You'll have to say that you understand it's going to be a different experience. Yeah. Questions? I said the one about the GRE, that would be program dependent, whether the GREs have been waived, like animal science, we've waived them for 2021. But you have to check each individual program to see whether they've waived the GRE requirements.
Yeah, at the risk of being extremely unpopular, I mean, we do still require GREs. I think we'll have to decide if people can't take them because of various hardships. Of course, that's a different consideration. But in general, we have found a very, very strong correlation between the quantitative GRE and success in our program. And so we, like virtually any other economics program, do use that as an input to the overall decision. That I would say it's very unlikely we will accept somebody with a very low GRE score, but that's it is definitely a part of the consideration.
Well, in animal science, what we found is that GRE score tends to correlate very strongly with chemistry grades. So in lieu of GREs, This year, we'll be looking even more strongly at the grades in chemistry. But we had to waive it because of we get like half of our incoming graduate students are off in international, and they're having difficulties ranging GREs testing at this time. I would say look on the program website for finding out information about GREs.
A question that was in the chat previously, Dr. Lim, was about your percentage or your makeup or your student demographics in AREC. So do you know how many of your students are female students?
So a bit, yeah, I do have that information. It's a bit less than half. I want to say about 40% in our program are female, and similar, I think, in the Maryland economics program. I'd say a bit more than half of our, both more than half of our applicants and half of our students are international students.
One question that was asked, what's a good place to find research opportunities? I'm thinking you're talking about now as an undergrad in order to prepare for graduate school. How do you get started in undergraduate research?
Contact professors, if you have a faculty member who's responsible for internships, contact that faculty member or that coordinator. So, talk with the undergraduate department about internships and research opportunities if you're an undergraduate.
All right, great. Let's go on to the next topic, and then we'll circle back to some other questions.
So letters of recommendation, how to approach faculty members and what you need to do before you actually need to ask for a recommendation. So in this case, I always say, talk to your professors. Most of them don't bite. Like I love to talk science, so my undergraduate students in my undergraduate classes know that I welcome opportunities to talk about science and research. So if you're taking a class and you find it really interesting, ask questions during class, go up to the professor after class, ask questions. That way the professor goes, oh, I know who you are. And then, if a year later you need a letter recommendation, you've already interacted with that professor. They will remember who you are. That'll give you a much better letter recommendation. If you wait until the last minute, you haven't really talked to your professors during your undergraduate time, and then you go approach one of them to ask for a letter recommendation, they might say no, or they might only write, she took my class and made this grade, asked questions or didn't ask questions. So you really want to get to know your professors, and also seek opportunities to work in their lab or work for them or help them in some way so they know you better. When it comes time to asking for a letter recommendation, ask early, don't wait till the deadline. Send them reminders, send them a copy of your CV, your resume. When you ask them, tell them, why you're going to graduate school, so that they have understanding that, you really are interested in going to graduate school, you have done the work for it. Basically, that's it.
Yeah, I think, it's this topic relates somewhat to what I was saying earlier, on the second topic, that you want to show that you're ready for graduate school. And if you've taken a course and you got a good grade and the professor knows that, the professor can write about that in a letter, and that's good, right? But that's not sufficient. And you want that letter writer to be able to talk about you on a more personal level, to say, this person, what the person's interested in, what the person is interested in, why the person wants to go to graduate school, and so that does mean, taking that additional step. I remember finding professors scary and not wanting to go to office hours and that kind of thing. But you got to bite the bullet and do it, because it is a very important part of your application. And I would say you should give some consideration. If you have a choice, like if you are lucky enough to have multiple people you're considering asking for letters, think about their stature and their profession, because that does carry some weight. When a committee is reviewing applications, general, look for full professors as opposed to assistant, look for professors who have advised lots of people so they can say, this person is ready for graduate school because I know what it means. I know what it takes to be ready for graduate school. So I think along those lines, again, if you're fortunate enough to have, to have multiple choices here, right? It may just be that if you need 3 letters, you have 3 people that you're close with, and those are the letter writers, and so you don't have a choice. But if you do have some discretion, think about that person's place in the profession.
And, yeah, the ones that I've written letters for mostly are the ones that either worked in my lab. I usually have several undergraduates working in my lab, and so then I get to know them and that they're ready for doing research. Or in the other case, today I wrote a letter for a student who had taken some of my classes and was always asking questions and meeting me after class to ask more questions. And so even though the student didn't work in my lab, I really had strong knowledge of their curiosity, their scientific curiosity, so I was able to write a letter.
I have a question. If a student chooses to kind of take some time off between their undergraduate degree and going to grad school and wants to reach out for a letter of recommendation, like how can they keep in touch, or what are some strategies that they should do during that gap or that time frame in order to stay relevant with faculty members to ask for a letter of recommendation?
I guess that would sort of depend on how well they knew the professor, because I have had students that do that, but these generally are the ones that worked in my lab, and so then I have a stronger recollection of them.
Yeah, probably after a few years, it's just going to be harder for the person to write the letter. They may not remember as well. Hopefully, if you are taking an extended period of time off, again, hopefully from the perspective of submitting your application, you've been able to develop some relationships with new bosses or whoever it might be, to write your letters. Obviously, there are cases where, that's just not possible, for a variety of great reasons, that just doesn't work out that way. In which case, if you do have to go back to a professor you had, a few years ago or more than a few years ago, it can certainly help to have kept in touch with this person along the way. And so you might think about that, periodically. And I like hearing from my former students just to, hear how they're doing. And I know lots of other professors do too. And so just keeping in touch that way can be nice. And it can also help you in the longer term.
Okay, in the interest of time, we'll go to the next topic and then we'll have additional questions.
All right, so personal statements. So first question is, why do we ask for these? It's not just to torture applicants. I personally remember writing my graduate school personal statement and really suffering to write it. And, I think applications were all due at the end of December. So, I was in my dorm trying to write this stupid statement, and all my friends were going out to parties and I couldn't do that. I was stuck trying to write this damn thing, and it was just really unpleasant. But there are good reasons why we actually ask for these personal statements, and that's something that I guess I didn't really appreciate until I've been reviewing applications, and so you want to think about it from the perspective of the admissions committee, right? Where like I was saying, in economics, we tend to put some stock on GRE scores, especially quantitative. So we'll look at that. We'll look at your undergraduate transcript. We'll look at your letters. And the letters, like we were saying just a moment ago, hopefully they will give us some sense, give the committee some sense of like who you are. But the personal statement is a chance to, you know, connect with the committee on a more personal level. And so what's really difficult, and I think what makes it such torture, is that you want to walk a very fine line. It's, you know, I guess it is similar in some ways to the statements you might have written to get into college. But, you know, the line you're trying to walk is that you want to convey who you are. You want to avoid, you know, cliches like, and just, you know, trite. I'm sort of like, I've always wanted to be an economist ever since I was 3 years old and was, you know, selling whatever on my front doorstep, selling lemonade. I just knew I was going to be an economist or something like that. Or I've always known I wanted to be an environmental economist because, you know, I like the outdoors and stuff like that. You know, if there is like some personal story you have and you can share, like, I think that's good. But the line you want to walk is, you know, don't overdo it, right? You know, don't make this into like a pitch for a movie or something like that. You know, you want to come across, you know, sort of honest and in your own voice. You want to keep it short. You know, we usually will get maybe 100 to 150 applications. We don't want to, you know, it's hard to sort of read through, you know, 5, 6, 8-page essays. Try to keep it to a couple pages. You can probably get across the points that you want to make in that amount of space. I think one thing to avoid is giving us a tour of your educational career. You know, hit the highlights, but, you know, we don't need to hear about the whole trajectory of you know, through your coursework and, you know, how much you loved calculus or, you know, whatever the story might be. So yeah, I think it's, you know, in some ways like the personal statement you wrote to get into college, but, you know, again, you really want to show the committee that you are ready for this and that you know what graduate school is like and how it differs from being an undergraduate, right? That it's not just about taking courses anymore. It's about doing research and, you know, learning new stuff and you know, having the drive, the determination to go out and learn new stuff and suffer through all the difficulty and the challenges of doing the research, but recognizing that, you know, it's worth it in the end. And so, you know, you want to sort of convey that maturity that you're ready to take the next step.
And if you did have the opportunity to do research as an undergraduate, you know, it's very good to write a little bit about that. You know, I had the opportunity to do research in Dr. So-and-so's lab, and, you know, while at times it was frustrating, I really enjoyed the problem solving aspect of it and became really interested in the metabolism of, you know, lymphocytes or whatever. And that's why I wish to continue and get a degree in immunology or whatever it is you're, you know, really interested in.
Yeah, I mean, be honest. You know, I've gotten, I remember seeing, you know, personal statements that were talking about how much, you know, the person liked work, you know, excruciating data work, and it just was not credible, you know, that somebody would actually like it. And you know, so I think honesty is important, and it can carry a lot of weight.
Okay, so a few questions. First, going to meeting professors and talking with them, getting to know them. How do you suggest that students do that currently in this virtual environment? It's not like they can casually walk up to them. So what are some strategies to connect with professors
I
this
hope the virtual
semester?
doesn't last forever. In my class last spring, of course, it was a relatively small number of students. So only about 11 students in the class, but one of the students would, when we were signing out, say, can I, you know, can you stay on a little longer? I want to talk. And I would. If it's a bigger class and you don't have that opportunity, then you might send the professor an email saying, I have further questions. Can we, you know, meet by Zoom at a certain time so I can talk with you?
And I think, you know, if somebody's going to write you a letter, it's, it takes time, it takes effort on their part. And so if they're willing to do that and they want to help you get into graduate school, they're also going to want to meet you, right? And they'll understand that that's part of the process, right? It's getting to know you. And so if you contact one, email one of your professors and ask to talk with them and they ignore you, then that's probably a sign that they wouldn't have written you a very good letter anyway. But I think that, most professors, hopefully all, but maybe nearly all, understand that these are different times and that we need to figure out how to do things in different ways. And so that may mean setting up Zoom calls or phone calls, whatever it might be. I've got 2 tomorrow with former students that I'm writing letters for, just to sort of talk about them about what I'm going to write for them. And so, I think that the letter writers also understand that things are weird now, and they'll work with you and try to figure out how to how to get to know you better.
Another question that was earlier in the chat was about funding. How do faculty members get funding in order to be able to offer assistantships, and does economic factors play into kind of that funding, and how do you determine that when choosing a program?
In some cases, that will depend on the program, because I presume that students are asking about not only graduate programs here at Maryland, but at other locations. Some science-based programs, the faculty members are responsible for paying for the assistantship, in which case they would need a fairly significant size number of grants and funding to run their program. And that's, I'd say blood, sweat, and tears on the faculty members' part of, writing grants and getting funding to run their program. In our program, the department pays for the 9.5-month assistantship. And so the students are expected to have some teaching duties in addition to research duties. And then the faculty member pays for the summer stipend. And so that means the faculty member has to have sufficient grant funding to cover their students during the summer. And, of course, funding to support the actual research itself, which doesn't tend to be cheap.
Yeah, and for us, I think it's probably on average a similar mix. That most of the student support is coming from the department's budget, and then that's being supplemented with external grants or contracts or whatever it might be. I think I was talking about being honest, and I should do that myself here. I think first of all, I think going to graduate school is a wonderful thing. I think it's maybe not for everybody, but it opens a lot of opportunities. If you like research, I think it's just a wonderful thing to do, and can lead to a really great career. That's a good thing, and I want to that I hope is sort of an important message that I'm conveying here. But I also want to say that to be honest, I mean, there are a lot of departments that are probably going to be admitting fewer students for the upcoming year. I know, and just because of budget cuts, and also because it's just it's no less challenging than it used to be in general to get external funding. And so I think a lot of programs are, I can't say what fraction, but definitely there are some programs that are going to be admitting fewer students, and they'll be announcing that. I know Maryland, each department is going to declare whether we're admitting the normal number of students or not. And hopefully other universities will be transparent like that. But I think that is just something, again, in the interest of transparency, that that is, I think, the sad state of the world. That could be going on. Again, I don't know how important that is, and it's something, if you're interested in a program, I think you can ask them explicitly. Is this in a normal admissions year or not? But that's it's possible.
A question about personal statements. Should students include opportunities that they were supposed to have maybe this semester or last semester that were canceled due to COVID. Should they include that in their personal statement?
I think they should briefly mention it. I wouldn't go on, for a long amount of time about it, but it shows that you had the, you actually looked and found a research opportunity and that it was open to you, but unfortunately you weren't able to, experience it.
And then these are going to be our last two questions. It's about master's versus PhD. So there are some programs that just offer a PhD. Can you talk a little bit about that process, if it's a standalone PhD, how students might apply to that? And then if someone gets a master's first and then goes on to a PhD, do they have to take the GRE over again?
The part about the GRE would be very program dependent and also depends on when you last took the GRE. I think they're good for like 5 years, if I remember correctly. So if you took it and got your master's in 2.5 years and then applied for a PhD and you had a good GRE scores from when you applied to master's, that generally would be accepted. What was the other question? Oh, go straight into the PhD. A lot of the biology, animal science programs actually take students in directly to the PhD, especially if they have research experience as an undergraduate. Part of this is because by the time they train you to do the type of research in their lab, if it's a master's student, then you're gone. If it's a PhD, they get 3 more years of work out of you. So it actually, they're considering it to their benefit to take someone straight into the PhD. So a lot of students are going straight into PhD now. Understand that it might take you a while to get your sea legs if you go straight into the PhD, so it might take you longer to get out. We certainly like to have students with masters apply to our PhD program because we then can see that they have a track record and they know what research is like. But we take them both ways in our program.
All right, awesome. Well, I want to make sure that we have enough time for our grad student panel. So I know the last information that you all want to share with students is how to find additional information.
So someone was asking about how to find information about research opportunities. Well, this was the one who's where to find information about how to apply. So you'd go to the graduate school website, but if you go to the, I think it might be the next slide. So I put this in for our program because of course I knew where it was, but each departmental, each research or each graduate program should have their own website with information for prospective students. And so in our case, if you look at the animal science website and go to the tab that says research, if you click on the research, you will see the different research areas that different faculty are working in, so you can get familiar with what type of research is going on. If you click on the graduate website and then click on the subheading prospective students, we actually have a heading there. I don't know if you can't really see it too well on the PowerPoint, but it says research opportunities, and that lists mentors that are seeking new graduate students and the type of research they're seeking graduate students in.
One other place to find information is, feel free after this is done to contact me. I see on this in this group at least a few students I've taught before, so that's great. Yeah, feel free. I'm findable easily to get in touch, and if you have any questions or any follow-up.
Great. So I will assume that both Dr. Kiefer and Dr. Lynn are available to any students that's here today for questions. And then I would highly also encourage you, if you're not in the animal science department or AREC department and thinking of those programs, to reach out to your faculty advisors in your programs and talk to them about graduate school that you're thinking of exploring graduate school, and kind of get their perspective on their individual disciplines. So I definitely want to thank Dr. Kiefer and Dr. Lynn for joining us today and giving that awesome presentation. I will put their emails in the chat later on to have students reach out to them if need be. So thank you so very much. Any last final words?
You want us to leave now so that they can meet with the graduate students without us, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Bye.
Okay, bye, everyone. Good
If you have
luck.
any questions, about animal science graduate program, feel free to email me. I am the graduate director for the animal science program.
All right, awesome. So now we will have our grad student panel, and I will have them start off by just introducing themselves. Many of them are on the line already. So if you can please introduce yourself, include your program of study, and whether you're a master's or PhD student. And why don't we get started with Noor? Did I say your name correctly?
Yes, that's correct. Hi, everyone. I am Noor, and I'm a PhD student in the animal science department. I just started this January, so it hasn't been as expected. But yeah, I actually was a transfer student. I don't know if they covered this in the part before, but I transferred. I did a year of my PhD at Auburn University, and I wasn't happy in the lab, and so I transferred, and it's been a great decision. So we can talk about that if anyone has questions later.
Great. Now we'll hear from Lovepreet. Did I say your name correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Hello, everyone. My name is Lovepreet Singh. I'm starting my 4th year this fall as a PhD candidate in plant sciences. And yeah, so my department is plant science and landscape architecture.
Great. Then we have Tabitha.
Hey everyone, my name is Tabitha. I'm a 2nd year master's student in the animal sciences department.
And last but not least, Sarah.
Hello, I'm Sarah. I'm kind of the oddball maybe. I'm in marine estuarine environmental sciences. I'm actually not at College Park. I am through UMCs at Chesapeake Biological Lab, which is a part of College Park, but I'm not physically on campus. This is my 2nd year of trying to obtain a master's degree, and with marine environmental science, you have specific research topic. I'm not sure if everyone has a thesis, but my research is on overwintering behavior of the blue crab.
Great. So our next question is, please discuss your decision to pursue a graduate degree. What factors went into choosing an academic program as well as a university? Why don't we start with Lovepreet?
So I grew up in the farm. I'm from in North India, and there, like being from the farm family and also love for the nature, I really like company of plants, and so that was a good mix to decide to go for agriculture education. And there, during the university, I got exposure to the potential of agriculture research in transforming the lives of farming community, and that was the main driver that I was interested to pursue the path of agriculture research. So for that, the graduate school. And in terms of the university and program, I was more interested in looking for the project that I want to work with. So that project that I was going to work was the position was available here at UMD. I applied at other places, and so it worked out well with my faculty advisor, and that's how but I do appreciate the unique geographic location of UMD. Like usually the land grant universities are not in big metropolitan areas, and but this is a very unique situation, and I really actually love it. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Tabitha?
Hey, so I kind of didn't stray far from where the apple fell from the tree. I got my undergraduate at UMD in animal sciences. So when I moved on to graduate school, I stayed in the same university, in the same department. Now, some people don't think it depends on the opinion that some people have. There is an opinion that you should go to somewhere else to get your master's or your PhD, just because it allows you to diversify your field of study, the ideas that you're presented with. However, I had such a good experience at UMD and in the animal sciences program, and the opportunities just worked out so well that I decided to stay here for my master's. The reason that I went to pursue my master's was because my career goal is to work in extension. I love the idea of bridging the gap between the research done at the university and translating that and making it something feasible for the industry to use. And so I knew that in order to be able to do that, I'd have to get some research experience. So I'm pursuing my master's currently. I'm considering going back for my PhD. But that was why I chose a graduate program and UMD specifically.
Thank you, Tabitha. Sarah?
So I'm kind of a oddball in this sense as well. I plan on going to graduate school for a while because what else was I supposed to do other than enter the workforce? So it came closer and closer and closer. I didn't want to take the GRE. I didn't want to study for the GRE. So I was okay with not going to grad school. Networking, if no one has told you, is really important in sciences or anything you want to do. So I've been networking for 4 years when I didn't even know it with my academic advisor, going to him, seeing him, being employed, various things. And during my last semester, he came up to me and said, you should really pursue a master's degree. I've put you in contact with 2 of the people that I went and got my PhD with. So through that, going through the steps, I met with the potential advisor. I applied, thinking that I would not get in. I applied, got in, full scholarship, wouldn't have to worry about paying anything. So I found my way through networking and never looked back.
Awesome. Always love hearing about the value of networking. Noor?
Yeah, so I was unsure for a while because my undergrad was in agriculture and I really liked extension and I wanted to be, especially in the Middle East where I did my undergrad, the extension agents are there's a lot to be desired. And so I wanted to help these farmers. And I was so sick of scientists, just publishing a paper and just like putting it in their drawer, so I chose a non-research master's. And there I kind of fell in love with in aquaculture. And so I fell in love with the genomics of aquaculture. And basically the aquaculture industry is like in dire need of like improving their seed stock because they're still kind of even using, unimproved stocks. So I want to help with that. I want to help feed the world. I don't want to be a PI. I don't want to go into academia, but kind of knowing your stuff is like the best way to start with that goal. And so I pretty much had to, and I liked it.
Great. Our next question is about your previous research experience. How has your undergraduate experience, research, or previous work experience prepared you for graduate study? Tabitha, why don't you start?
Sure. So being in the animal sciences program, I had kind of limited undergrad research. The research that I did mainly was very hands-on. I did research involving horses and ponies. And so I was at the farm, mucking stalls, turning horses out, feeding, and then collecting a little bit of data, but it was mostly just weighing things. When it came to graduate school, I really decided I wanted to kind of step out of what I had done before. And so I joined a lab where I was doing more biochemistry based analyses. So I am running assays, I'm taking care of mice, I'm harvesting tissue and running different metabolism assays and that kind of thing. So I really wanted to kind of narrow down what I was doing. And so I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to stay at UMD, is because I had made connections and I had proven that I was a hard worker and I was willing to learn. And so more people in the animal sciences department were willing to take me on and teach me those things. So undergraduate research definitely taught me a lot of things that I still use and apply in the lab today. But I have definitely branched out my skills as I joined graduate school.
Great. Sarah, let's hear from you.
So I kind of had the bare minimum of research experience. I only got the opportunity to be in one during my freshman year, which was a very basic habitat selection, which I am no longer in that field of study anymore. I've switched to fish ecology. So the research experience gave me the information on how to perform an experiment, what kind of goes into that, the data analysis of it. Otherwise, in specifics, like I'm learning all new techniques, I'm learning GIS, I'm learning a little deeper into experimental data and how to analyze it and such. So it gave me the background knowledge, but unless you do it in the specific field that you're going to do your master's or PhD in, it's not going to give you everything you need to succeed in a master's program for research-based.
Great. Noor?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Sarah and Tabitha. I don't think that any undergrad research experience helped me, other than it helped me get into the program and showed the admissions officers that I have the capability. But you're going to be starting all over and you're going to be learning new techniques and you're going to be trained on it in grad school. And so unfortunately, I think that's all about that it helped me with. So.
And Lovepreet.
I agree that like for getting into the grad school, the undergraduate research experience is very valuable. So from where I did my bachelor's undergrad, there we didn't have like the structure of like where we had undergraduate research internship positions or undergraduate research assistant or something like that was not part of the infrastructure. So I didn't get that experience, but I tried to like do some volunteering and some making connection with the professor and seeing if I can help the graduate students and learn something hands-on, so I can demonstrate that I have experience to get into the grad school. So that is how I use that opportunity just to build credibility. So that was.
So I'll ask one more prepared question, then we'll open it up to students' questions because I want them to hear direct. I want you all to answer their questions. Can you talk about what you enjoy most about being a grad student, but also what has been a challenge that you've had to overcome in pursuit of graduate education? And Sarah, why don't we start with you?
What was that first question again?
What do you enjoy most about being a grad student, but then also what's a major challenge that you've had to overcome in your pursuit of graduate education?
So what I loved most prior to pandemic was that I was actually getting involved in the community. So I was going to festivals, I was getting my hands into teaching children on a Saturday to just get my experience out there. That was really enjoyable for me because during my undergraduate, I kind of stayed into my dorm and didn't go anywhere and didn't persuade anyone other than in the sciences why it was important. So community outreach was very important prior to pandemic. Now I can't get out. The challenge is, of course, the pandemic right now. If you would have told me that during your master's, you're going to be in a pandemic and you're going to be shut in your house for like 7 months indefinitely, I would have probably deferred a year and would not have come, because it's very challenging sitting in your house and trying to get all the work done that you need to in a day where there's distractions. There's, oh, I can bake cookies. Ooh, I can talk to my boyfriend. Ooh, I can do all these other things besides my work. And it's very hard to get motivated in the apartment and not think about work all the time and not think about the chores. So the balance between life and graduate school is very challenging right now.
Thank you. Noor.
So one thing that I love about grad school is it really forces you to be like self-motivated and self-directed. And you can kind of go off on your own tangents. And if you have a question and you want to, I don't know, maybe set up an experiment about that, you can approach your PI and um, ask them about it. And I'm lucky, and my PI is like, great, you want to investigate this, like, let's start. So that's great. A lot of challenges. One thing that is difficult to deal with is imposter syndrome. I feel like it never ever ever goes away. You just kind of like live with it. And another thing is you'll always feel, and this is kind of ties in with your imposter syndrome, but I feel like I'm always working, and at the end of the week, I don't have tangible results. I don't have anything to say like, yeah, this worked. I maybe spent 10 hours working on debugging a code that now I can do in 2 seconds. Or I went off on a million tangents because in my lit review, I just, was trying to find one thing and I didn't find it. And I spent the whole day. I don't know. It's just very hard justifying like what you've done at the end of the week, because a lot of it is a learning curve. A lot of it is not going to work out, but you have to just deal with it.
Lovepreet.
I agree with Sarah and Noor, and one thing I like about the graduate experience is the diversity of the work I do. That I work in lab, field, greenhouse, and also teaching. So I really enjoy that part, and also like I can talk about my work with other people and have very productive discussions. And challenges, definitely there are a lot of challenges, and as previously Noor mentioned, the imposter syndrome and the that you put a lot of efforts in figuring out a lot of things, but at the end of the day, if you don't like show some results, some tangible result, like they won't be considered as a. But one way I have tried to like kind of feel okay about it is to like just thinking about that this is a training process, and we are like in the training, so it's okay if it's not working, but we tried and I'm learning, because it can be hard, like you that if you're not getting results especially, and like things are not working well, and you might feel isolated, and like it can be hard. And in that time, I would encourage you thinking it as a training, and also like staying connected with the community, and highly recommend the peer mentoring or establishing mentoring networks that you can get that support to keep moving.
I believe, Tabitha, you're the last one to answer this question.
Sure. I just want to preface this by saying that I do have one of those teaching assistantships that Dr. Kiefer was talking about. So within the animal sciences department, I have to be a TA for a class once a semester. You don't get to pick which class you TA for, at least in the animal sciences department. You're just assigned to a course. So my favorite thing about grad school is that it's very different than being an undergrad, because in grad school, 6 credits is considered full-time if you're a teaching assistant. And that's because you have 3 different priorities when you're a graduate student with a teaching assistantship. You have your research, you have classes, and you have being a TA. I really like that different experience. So in any given day, I'm doing all 3 of those things. And I really like that. I'm not sitting in classes all day. I'm not working in the lab all day. I'm not teaching a class all day. I'm doing all 3. That's also the bane of my existence, because you are pulled in 3 different directions. So your PI is going to tell you your research is the most important, and that's where your focus should be. Your instructors are going to tell you your classes are the most important, and that's where your priority should be. Your professor is going to say they need you to grade these papers today, and that's where your priority should be. So it's a difficult way to balance your life in grad school, in addition to all the other things you're doing outside of grad school. But I think it really keeps me on my toes. But it is definitely a challenge to try and balance everything out.
Great. Now we'll go on to some student questions. So the first question was, do you know of any openings in immunology in either animal sciences, CNMS, or vet med? Does anyone have any connections to immunology programs?
Ian, you work in Dr. Zhao's lab, right? Because I don't know if he's hiring any graduate students. I know Department of Vet Med does a lot of immunology stuff, but I don't have any connections over there as to knowing who, if anyone has any openings with that. So I think it would require reaching out to maybe Dr. Kiefer. I think she might be able to tell you. Yeah, I would shoot Dr. Kiefer an email about that.
Okay.
Dr. Zhao, he didn't have openings, unfortunately. That was last year, and then the pandemic, and the internship that I got in immunology with AstraZeneca fell through. So I'm here.
Well, let's move on to our next question. What do you do if you know you want to go to grad school, but don't have a specific field in mind, but you know it's in a certain scope? How do you narrow it down? How do you do that research?
So I don't know about this school or department. I know like different departments in UMD have it, but rotational programs. So there are programs where you apply and then you kind of, your first year, you spend time in different labs and you are exposed to the research that they're doing, and then you pick which one you like the best. And I think they have to pick you maybe, but that's possibility. Or just if you know what program, just start researching, like reaching out to the professors or their grad students and ask them exactly what they do, and maybe you can find out more info.
I think maybe another thing, if you're trying to narrow down, definitely reaching out to individual PIs, but also I think something that people don't usually consider is the type of mentor that a PI could be. PIs kind of range, and so there's some that are completely hands-off, like you pick your project, you do all the research, and then there's others that are in the lab every single day, answering questions, working with you, meeting with you consistently. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So if you have like a department narrowed down and you're just trying to figure out between like different PIs and they have varying research things, that's something to keep in mind as well.
So I didn't have a specific interest in mind. I went here. My mentor had funding on a specific project that I would have to do. He told me the research project. I said, sounds interesting, and I went into it. Will I go through my whole life studying blue crab? Probably not. So the specific field or having a specific research question is very uncommon. One person in my lab, she knew exactly what she wanted. She took a gap year, so maybe that's what you do as well. You take a gap year, figure it out, go into a job, that maybe you'll fall in love with, take a gap year. But she's so centralized right now that finding a job right now in that centralized field of such specific thing is kind of up in the air. So take a gap year. You can also contact professors, see what they have. A lot of them will probably have funding on specific topics. So maybe you'll find a topic that you really love and you'll jump right into it.
Okay. The next question is, were any of you TAs in undergrad, and do you feel like that has helped with your application process to get into grad school?
I think it's definitely a plus. Like the research experience, TA experience is also another thing, especially if you are trying to be considered for an assistantship. It really shows that you kind of know how behind the scenes how a class works. For me specifically, since I stayed in the department, I had UTA'd for a class that I am now a GTA for. They knew that I had experience with that material, and so I was like a shoe-in for that. But even if you're going to another university, I think it shows that you're a good enough student, like you did well enough in that class to become a TA, and also you showed the skills to be able to be a leader and to teach. So I think that is definitely a plus.
If you love it, you should do it regardless. And if you love it so much, maybe you look into academia.
Did any of you enter grad school after taking a few years off to work in between undergrad and grad? And if you did, how vital was your work experience during that gap year as it related to your graduate pursuits?
So I didn't, but as I said, my master's was non-thesis, and so I did an internship instead. And I actually accepted a job at the place where I did an internship, but I kind of like knew that I wanted to study genomics of aquaculture. And although the job was like in the R&D department, I figured that it was there's nothing that I could have done, no amount of work that I could have done that would have helped prepare me other than like do it, because genomics is like very specialized, and you have to, there's no way around it. But if you can justify like the skills that you learn, then do it. Also, making money before you are a poor grad student is always a good option. So
this is a really great question that I want to make sure we get answered. Should students base their choice on a PI based on that PI's mentorship style? So I know, Tabitha, you mentioned some of them are more hands-on, some are hands-off, or should they base it on the research topic and their interest in those topics?
I would also like to respond. I think it's kind of hard if you don't know many people like to know about the mentorship style. But say like if you're applying to different schools, and one way to assess that might be like interacting with the grad student of the professor or like other people in there. But with the topic of research is easily you can find that information. And but I highly recommend if you can find the mentorship style and going with that. And like it doesn't have to be, but it doesn't have to be like total, totally different topic, because that way you won't get the technical skills you need to pursue your passion and everything and go on. But there can some compromise can be made, because you can many people who do their PhD in one research topic, they don't end up doing research in the same topic. They change things, because PhD is like training you to that you can ask right questions and test the hypothesis and then document and make some conclusion. That's like a training. And so you can easily change topic in your research career. But I if you can, I would highly recommend like choosing a good mentor, and that really will help you and shape you and make you a good researcher, which is very important. And sometimes, unfortunately, mentorship is not like given that credit, because if we see in academia, like from we see the how the people evaluate professors. Usually, they look at the publications and the grant money they get, and because of that, some people just don't want to put efforts in mentorship. So
Also, you're not just going to have your mentor and PI. I, I know in the animal sciences department, you're supposed to pick your dissertation committee within the end of your first semester. I haven't done that because of the pandemic, but you are, and they do that to force you to contact these people and form relationships, and they can also direct you. So if there's someone that you really, really like, but maybe you don't want to work on the things that they're working on, you can include them in your committee and they can also mentor you.
Excellent point. I know we are running short on time, so we'll just take a few additional questions. So make sure you write them in the chat. But a question from my perspective, can you talk to students about like the realities of being a grad student? Like, what are some things that you were not prepared of or prepared for that you didn't think about that students should be aware of as they're thinking about pursuing a graduate degree?
I would like to add something, that there can be more responsibilities on you, just like doing research and studying. So like I would highly recommend like setting up expectations, as UMD has tradition of doing the mutual expectation form, and where you set expectation with your research advisor and mentor, and so that it will be very helpful, because sometimes if there's no clear communication, there can be a lot of miscommunication, frustration, and there can be some responsibilities that you're not supposed to do, but you are imposed on to do, or things like that. And so that's like something like how you navigate that, and like how you can do the conversation with your advisor, so that it's for the betterment of both of you, and avoiding any miscommunication, I think uh, something I would recommend.
This is your degree. It's kind of your life. And so some PIs expect it more than others, but you need to be prepared to stay late to run that experiment, get up early and be here and get that thing done before your class starts. Come in on the weekend and double check this thing or take care of this problem. You definitely have to be flexible when it comes to grad school. And even especially with the teaching assistantship, there's no room for like a part-time job. So like you get paid a graduate student stipend and it's enough to get you by. But as far as like extra commitments outside of that, it's not really something that it's not like there's nothing saying you can't, but it's definitely frowned upon because this is supposed to be your priority in your life. So it is something you just kind of have to work with. And as Lovepreet said, like your mutual expectations with your PI is definitely something you should work out. What they expect from you and what you expect from them is something you should be very clear on. So.
Also, just to add to that, expect that you're not going home as much as you did in undergrad. You're not going home for that week or month during winter break. You're not going home for a spring break. You're not going home for certain things. I have a winter experiment coming up. I'm probably not going to be able to go home for Christmas. You have to be okay with that. Your work, unfortunately, comes first. Unless there's dire emergency, then they will work something out with you. Unless, you better be ready to work and get everything done so you can graduate.
Thank you. That was a hard reality to hear. What do you all plan on doing once you're done with your degrees, either your master's or your PhD?
I'll go first. These are the worst questions that just give me anxiety. So I don't have a plan after graduate school. Um, a lot of things are up in the air with the pandemic, the presidential election, trying to get a job in my field right now for marine environmental science is challenging, and you're going against a lot of people. So, unfortunately, whatever I get is probably where I'm going to go. It might not be something that I love, it might not be something that I like, but you have to make a living, you have to get a job. That's the unfortunateness of all of the situation right now. So I don't have a plan after grad school. I'm going to talk with my mentor and see what he has available to me, and I'll apply to 20, 30 jobs and see what I get.
Tabitha?
I would love to land a job in extension. I would love a position that is part lecture, part extension work. So I possibly could be just teaching classes and also working with extension. I don't necessarily think I want to do a PI position. I don't think I want to run my own lab with my own graduate students and that kind of thing. But also the feeling in graduate school where you're just like, I don't want anything to do with this after I graduate is also a real feeling. We had a master's student a year or two ago, and when asked what she wanted to do, she was like, honestly, I just want to have a goat herd and run my own homestead. And that was like, that was her feeling after graduate school. But yeah, it's a time. We'll see what happens.
Lovepreet?
So there are like after doing a degree in agriculture research, there are like mainly the like kind of four roughly career tracks. One going to academia, then going to industry, going for a nonprofit or government research. Like that's what I'm thinking about. And so now these days what I'm doing is that I have made this my professional plan that I doing informational interviews where I'm talking to people in these different four areas to get some real insight that what their work look like, and just trying to like compare that with my skill set and my values, that whether I will be a good fit in that position or not. Because unfortunately here, like in the grad school, you're mostly like exposed to only academic scenario, like how academia works and all, but you don't get to know much about the industry and other kind of career options. So like doing something like that is helping me to know the inside, and then I can choose a good fit, because we all want to be successful at what we are doing. And so so that's what I'm trying to do.
And Nor?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think grad school is supposed to train you to be, a new PI, an independent researcher, and train you for a job in academia. But even if that's what you want, like I think a crazy low percentage of people who have those degrees land those jobs because they're not abundant. Fortunately for me, I don't want to do that. I don't know. I guess I have like an academic crush on this other lab, and I really would like to do a postdoc with them, and because I love their work and their papers are so great. But I don't want to be roped into a postdoc. One thing that they don't talk to you about is if you do a postdoc and then you go into industry, your salary is never going to match with someone that just went into industry right away. And so that's something to consider. If I don't have a plan to, be a PI, why would I do that? So yeah, I want to work in private industry and I don't know, make fish babies for you all to enjoy.
Awesome. So in the interest of time, I just want to wrap up the panel with any final words. And then if you are willing to connect with the students that are on this webinar, feel free to drop your email in the chat if you're open to answering student questions. But what are some last final words that you can share with students about being a grad student? Tabitha, why don't you start?
Sure. Yeah, definitely do your research about grad school. I don't think that my process was the best. I just applied only to UMD. Thankfully, I got in. I had no backup plans. I think it's important to shop around for a university, shop around for a program, shop around for a research scope, and shop around for your PI. There's a lot to consider, and especially if you're going for a PhD, you could be stuck there for 4 or 5 years. So try and make the best choice you can, and put effort into your application, especially now that schools might be a little harsher in their criteria as far as choosing grad students. So really take it seriously, because this is, your graduate degree, and it's going to kind of dictate where your life goes in the future. So not to like pressure you and make it sound scary, but
Thank you. Lovepreet, any final words?
Yeah, I would say that it is a journey, and take it as a training, and you will be a very different person, I feel, from your undergrad to after you graduate. Your personality will change a lot. And yeah, definitely it's difficult, but it's a great learning experience. So thinking along those lines will help you keep going.
Great, thank you. Noor?
You're going to feel guilty all the time that you're not doing enough. It's mostly going to suck. It's not going to suck if you like your work. But your mental health, I think, is going to take a toll. And so you have to make sure that you have a really good support system, someone that tells you that you're amazing, even when you really, really don't feel like you are. And if you reach a point where you think that you made the wrong choice, know that you can always leave. You can, even if you're 2.5 years into your PhD, like, you don't have to complete it. You could do something else and be much happier, or you can transfer labs, which I did. And it absolutely changed my life. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. You're still successful, even if your trajectory changes. Awesome. And last but not least, Sarah.
Don't forget the importance of networking now in your undergraduate degree. Networking is how you get into places. That's how you get your recommendation letters. That's how you, maybe down the line 10 years, that might be how you get the job. Network now while you can. It's important. It will help you out. Another thing is, do not pay for graduate school. Do not go into more debt than you need to. Do not listen to the PI that says he does not have funding for you. They usually have funding. If they don't have funding, shop more. Do not go into debt for graduate school. And make sure that you have a salary as well, so you don't have to worry about working other than being a TA. You don't want to be waitressing while you're in grad school.
Sorry. Also, at Auburn, I had an assistantship where I didn't even have to be a TA. No one in the department was a TA, and my funding was just research. And so there are some places where your job is 100% TA. But yeah, don't pay for grad school.
I would like to answer a very quick question. There was a question about, can you do a teaching assistant in different department than you're hired as a grad student in? And answer is yes, you can do the TA in different department than you're hired in. So.
Great. So I just want to thank all of our graduate students, our current graduate students, for being a part of this panel. Thank you for helping our students understand the realities of being a grad student. And thank you for also being accessible to our students after this panel. Students, thank you so very much for attending. Just to let you know, in the future, the University Career Center has lots of different events that you can participate in. Feel free to go to our events calendar, careers.umd.edu, and find out all the other events that we have going on around graduate school as well as careers that can help you explore and network to figure out what you want to do. So thank you everyone for coming, and have a good evening.